for our dollars. Now, you have been very outspoken in eliminating income tax, the IRS, much like Ron Paul. And so tell me then, what is your plan if we were to do this? How are we going to get money into our government? How are we going to do this? How are we going to fund our government then?
Okay. So I did work, and in fact here in Houston I had a very large, very effective chapter of an organization that had the purpose of replacing the federal income tax with a national sales tax. The group I worked with was actually a predecessor. Probably most of your Houston audience would know the Fair Tax organization. But one of the inherent problems with that plan was it still required the same, it was what they call revenue neutral, meaning we're still collecting as much tax, there's just a different mechanism for doing it. A different mechanism that I think had a lot of advantages. But quite frankly, the more I've listened to Ron Paul, you know, in the interim, the more convinced I've become that that's the wrong target to go after. That if we reduce the size of government down to what it really ought to be, essentially, you know, national defense and protecting the rights to life, liberty, and property of the individual, and that's pretty much it, you know, out of Washington, then the amount of tax would be so small nobody would care. Right. You know, what the mechanism would be. Exactly. And the personal income tax, the amount of money that's generated by the personal income tax is just about equal to what we pay on interest on the national debt. So if we eliminated the national debt, we can eliminate the personal income tax, and that would be a wash.
Exactly. And I don't think people really realize that, because, you know, whenever they start talking about, well, if we don't pay our taxes, you know, our roads won't get fixed and things like this. And it's like, but your personal taxes don't go to that.
Right.
That we're just paying interest. It's like if you have a Discover card and all you do every month is look and see how much interest they charge you and you pay that. You're never going to pay it off. I mean, it just, you know, it just doesn't even make sense. Right. You're never going to pay it off that way. So something has to change.
And you hit on something very important there, I think, related to our economic situation, is economics work pretty much the same, you know, whether you're talking about your family or your business or your government. You know, if you're spending consistently, ongoingly, not a one-time emergency thing, you know, but continuously spending more than you're bringing in, more than you're making, living beyond your means, if you will, at some point it's got to end.
Exactly.
You know, you can't continue doing that forever. And I've watched people, you know, roll, you probably have to, you know, roll a credit card balance to a new card, and I got this zero interest, and it's kind of like, you can't, you may be able to do that for a year or two, but at a certain point.
Yeah, at a certain point you run out of credit card companies
exactly
to do that with. So now let's talk about the Federal Reserve. How do you think it's impacting our economy and taxes, and what's your solution for the problem with the Federal Reserve?
Well, the Federal Reserve is one of the biggest crimes that's ever been laid on the American public. It's, you know, I think we really need to start a fundamental education program, educating, you know, Main Street America, you know, as we're saying, on what the Federal Reserve is, you know, the history of how it was formed, you know, how it functions and the purpose it serves in our economy. Most people think that it's part of the federal government. It's not. It's not federal. It's not reserve.
Exactly.
You know, it is a consortium, if you will, of bankers, private bankers. And you can see right now what's been happening, where ordinarily in an economy, if it was a free market, you would have some boom and correction, maybe a boom and correction, small ones, you know, just little ups and downs of the economy. But with the Federal Reserve Bank controlling that, they lower interest rates and you get boom, you know, and the politicians say we want, you know, some more of that, you know, and some more boom and some more boom. And we've boomed on up with no downward corrections, to the point where now the downward correction is catastrophic. So they manipulate the economy. They do it to the advantage of a limited number of people. And the whole thing with, I mean, when you start explaining it to people, okay, so they're this group of guys, and the federal government goes, oh, we need another $1 trillion, you know, to spend on these programs. Okay, it used to be we used to say wrote it in the ledger. Now they push a button on the computer. You know,
right.
Say, okay, here's your $1 trillion. Oh, by the way, start sending me interest on that.
Exactly.
You know, and they never had it to begin with. They just put an entry in a bookkeeping system, and now they're collecting interest, you know, on that. It's like, it's so insane. People go, oh no, it can't be like that. You know,
and people do think, no, it can't be like that. But I think what we're starting to see, because of, now it's not just Ron Paul out there who's saying that.
Right.
And for years they called him a kook or whatever,
Right.
and they're like, you're just a kook and you're Dr. No up on the Hill. But now, whenever we watched all the stuff on the bailout, we saw a lot of representatives and senators who actually were speaking out, and they were from the main parties, they were from third parties,
Right.
but they all were saying the same thing about the Federal Reserve. So I think the truth is coming out there now.
Definitely.
So I mean, it's good to hear. Of course, you're third party, and we've heard it from third party.
Right.
But we're hearing it from other people. So I mean, I think it's great. You need to keep doing it as well. But I think now that the other two parties are saying it as well, then that's going to only help the third parties out there.
Right.
So I think that's great.
And I don't want to present myself as an economic expert. I haven't done nearly the study or have nearly the understanding that Ron Paul does, for example. But I know a smart man when I see one.
Right.
I know an economic genius when I see one. He had it figured out. He told people this was what was coming, that this was what was going to happen. So let's turn to the Ron Paul and others like him who have seen already, who aren't now on the bandwagon,
right.
As things are crashing, but saw it coming and had the insight on economics to know that, and ask them, okay, based on your obvious expertise in that area, where do we go from here?
Exactly.
How do we get it corrected? And, the basics are, you stop things like the bailout program. You lower taxes. You do not raise them on any group, at any level. And you cut the government spending. Then you address, the monetary system. And again, it's going to take, I think, a little more work. Like you were saying, a lot of people are becoming much more aware. And they've actually, played into the hands of that, I think, by being so prominent in this bailout situation. But you start making people more aware of what the workings are, how it could be corrected, and then you get it done. And I was doing some reading just within the last couple of days that said there was actually something in the original Federal Reserve Act that allows the president can just sign it away.
Really?
And I haven't researched it completely yet, but the source that I was reading said that John Kennedy in 1963 decided that that the Federal Reserve was damaging the economy, that it was a detriment, and had signed the authorization to stop the Federal Reserve banking system 3 weeks before he was assassanated.
Oh, wow. Huh. That's very interesting.
We need to research
that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, let's also talk about another huge topic that we're hearing, besides the bailout, besides raising taxes. And by the way, if anybody watched the presidential debates, what we see is they're both going to raise, just in different areas. Like you said, we don't need to raise in any area, but they're both going to raise. It's just going to be in different areas.
Right.
So, but another hot topic in the debates is the Iraqi war. So where do you stand on the Iraq war?
Well, here's what I see about the whole war on terror concept. Is terrorists are a lot like fire ants. And if you want to keep fire ants out of your yard, you treat your yard. You don't waste time and money treating your neighbor's yard.
Or the whole neighborhood.
Or the whole neighborhood. In some hope to eradicate them. So just like fire ants are always going to show up someplace, so are terrorists and dictators. They're going to show up someplace. But let's bring our troops home. Let's support our troops by bringing them home alive so that they're ready and able to defend us here at home against a terrorist attack.
Absolutely. Well,